The quiet moment that changed everything. The rain had stopped, but the city still carried its silence like a secret. Sandra Bullock sat alone in her trailer, the sound of droplets sliding down the window. Outside, the film crew was packing up. It had been a long, difficult day. She had smiled for the cameras, laughed between takes, but deep inside, something felt wrong. Her success, her fame, even her laughter, all felt heavy now, like a costume that no longer fit. She had always believed in being strong. She had built her career on that belief. Strong women, strong choices, strong control. But lately, strength felt different. It felt like pretending. She had been pretending to be fine when, truthfully, she was exhausted by expectations, by loneliness, by the quiet that followed applause. That evening, Keanu Reeves knocked softly on her door. She hadn't expected him to visit. He was always kind, always calm, but rarely intrusive. When she opened the door, his eyes carried the same quiet she felt inside. "You didn't come to dinner," he said, voice soft. "I brought you something." In his hands was a small paper cup of tea. Simple, nothing special. But the way he held it, with both hands gently, as if it were something that mattered, made her pause. She smiled faintly. "You think tea can fix everything?" "No," he said, smiling back. "But sometimes it helps people stop pretending they're okay." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Keanu didn't push. He just sat down on the couch across from her. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was real. It was the kind of silence that allows truth to breathe. Finally, she sighed. "I don't even know who I am anymore, Keanu. I wake up every day with cameras waiting. People think I'm confident, happy, perfect. But I'm tired of being someone they expect me to be." He listened quietly, his gaze steady. "You don't have to be perfect to be loved," he said. "You just have to be real." She laughed bitterly. "Real doesn't sell tickets." He looked down, then said something that made her heart still. "Maybe not. But real heals people, and sometimes it heals you first." Those words hit her like soft thunder. For years, she had built walls made of charm, success, and endless schedules. But here, in the quiet of that small trailer, Keanu's words reached beyond those walls. She didn't respond right away. She just looked at him, and for the first time saw not just the co-star she had known, but a man who carried his own quiet wisdom. There was no ego in his eyes, no judgment, no pity, just peace. As the minutes passed, Sandra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. Not the kind that came from pretending everything was fine, but the kind that came from knowing she didn't have to pretend. She looked out the window. The rain had stopped completely now. Small drops still clung to the glass, catching light from the street lamps outside. She whispered, "You really believe kindness can fix things?" "Not fix," Keanu said, "but it can guide you back when you lose your way." She stared at him. "And what if I've already lost too much?" He smiled faintly, that soft, understanding smile of his. "Then maybe it's time to stop measuring what's lost and start noticing what's still here." The next morning, Sandra arrived early on set. The crew was surprised. She wasn't rushing or hiding behind sunglasses. She stood quietly, holding her script, watching the sunrise spill gold across the set. Keanu walked by, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed her one without a word. She smiled. "Tea again?" "Some habits are worth keeping," he said. For the rest of the day, something in her shifted. She laughed, not the loud kind, but the gentle kind that comes from peace. She treated everyone around her with more softness, noticing the small things she had always missed before, the nervous assistant trying her best, the tired sound engineer, the extra who looked invisible in the crowd. She realized everyone was fighting something unseen. Later, when they filmed a heavy emotional scene, she didn't act. She just felt. And the crew noticed. The director whispered, "Whatever she's doing today, it's real." That night, as Sandra walked back to her trailer, she saw Keanu sitting alone under the soft glow of a studio light, reading a small book. She stopped beside him and asked, "What are you reading?" He looked up. "Letters of Marcus Aurelius," she laughed. "Of course you are. Something deep and ancient." He closed the book gently. It's about finding peace in chaos. I think we all need that, she nodded slowly. Maybe that's what I've been missing. He looked at her kindly. Peace doesn't mean everything around you is calm. It means you stay calm despite everything around you. She smiled. You make it sound simple. He looked toward the stars. It's not simple, but it's worth trying. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need. The quiet between them was enough. The kind of quiet that carried trust, not loneliness. She felt it deeply, the unspoken truth that sometimes the deepest lessons don't come from noise, but from silence shared between two hearts that understand. That night, before sleeping, Sandra wrote in her journal, a habit she had lost long ago. She wrote, "Today I learned that wisdom doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in kindness." She closed the notebook with a soft smile. Outside, the stars were clear, and somewhere deep inside her, a light had turned on again. The letter he never meant to share. The morning sun slipped through the blinds, painting thin lines of light across Sandra's trailer. She sat with a cup of tea in her hands, staring at the steam as it rose slowly into the still air. It had been days since that quiet night with Keanu, and yet his words kept returning like gentle waves that refused to fade. She had started noticing things she once ignored, the softness in people's voices when they were tired, the courage behind a quiet apology, the unspoken weight people carried when they smiled. She realized how many hearts break silently, just trying to keep the world from seeing their cracks. The filming was halfway through and the studio had grown tense. Deadlines loomed, scenes were reshot, and exhaustion filled the air like a heavy mist. Yet amid all the pressure, Keanu remained the same, steady, calm, almost unshakable. He moved through chaos like someone who had made peace with it long ago. One afternoon, between takes, Sandra saw him sitting near the edge of the lot, away from the noise. He was writing something in a small notebook. Curiosity got the better of her. "What are you writing?" she asked, walking up behind him. He smiled faintly. "Thoughts. Things I don't say out loud." She tilted her head. "Like a diary? Maybe. Or maybe it's just where I leave the noise so my mind can breathe." She sat beside him. "You ever let anyone read it?" "No," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Some things are meant to stay quiet." For a few moments, neither spoke. She watched the wind move through the trees, brushing away loose leaves. There was something peaceful about the way he sat there. Not distracted, not performing, just present. It made her wonder what kind of storms he had survived to learn that kind of stillness. Then suddenly, a call came from the assistant director. "Keanu, Sandra! We need you both for scene 42. They stood up, brushing off the dust. The moment passed. But that night, as Sandra walked back to her trailer, she saw something lying near her door. It was a folded page, slightly wrinkled by the wind. She picked it up, assuming it was a script note. When she opened it, her breath caught. It wasn't a script. It was a handwritten letter. The first line read, "To anyone who finds this, maybe you needed to." She froze. The handwriting was unmistakably Keanu's. She hesitated, unsure whether to read further. It felt personal, private. But then she remembered his words from earlier. Some things are meant to stay quiet. And yet, maybe this one wasn't. She began to read. "People often ask how I stay calm. They think peace is something you find once, like a treasure. But it's not. Peace is a choice you make every morning, sometimes every minute. I've learned that kindness doesn't mean weakness. It means strength without noise." She stopped, her eyes wet. Every line felt like it was written not for the world, but for a soul trying to heal. When life takes people away, when pain returns in new forms, when the world feels louder than your heart, remember, silence is not emptiness. It's where understanding begins. I write these things not to teach, but to remind myself that being gentle in a harsh world is not easy. But it's worth it. Sandra closed the letter slowly. Her chest ached in a way she couldn't describe. She had seen Keanu smile through storms, help strangers without anyone noticing, give more than he ever talked about. Now she understood it wasn't an act. It was a choice. She tucked the letter into her bag, unsure if he had dropped it by mistake or left it for her to find. But she knew one thing. It had reached her at the right time. The next morning, she brought him coffee. He looked up, smiling. "That's new. You usually drink tea." She sat beside him, holding out the cup. Thought I'd return the favor? As he took the cup, she said quietly, "You once said peace is a choice. I think I understand that now." He looked at her curiously. "You found the letter, didn't you?" She froze. "You meant for me to?" He smiled gently. "I left it there. Sometimes words find people better than we do." She exhaled slowly, her heart warm and heavy at once. "You write like someone who's seen a lot," he nodded. "We all have. We just tell our stories differently." She wanted to ask more, to know what pain hid behind that calm smile, but something told her not to. Not yet. Instead, she said softly, "Thank you for sharing it. I needed it." "We all need reminders sometimes," he said. That day, Sandra carried herself differently. Her tone with the crew softened. When a young makeup artist accidentally spilled powder on her dress, she didn't react with frustration. She laughed, helped clean it, and said, "It's fine. We've all had messy mornings." The girl smiled, visibly relieved. During lunch, Sandra saw an older worker struggling with heavy cables in the sun. Without thinking, she walked over and helped him move them. At first, he refused, embarrassed, but she smiled. "Trust me, I've carried heavier things." The man laughed, and for the first time that week, the whole crew smiled with him. Keanu noticed from a distance. He didn't say anything, but his quiet smile said it all. Later that evening, when filming ended, Sandra sat beside him on a low wall near the lot. The sky had turned orange and violet, fading into night. "You changed today?" he said softly. "No," she replied. "You just reminded me who I was before I forgot." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. She asked, "Do you ever wonder why some people never learn peace, no matter how much success they have?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe they think peace is something the world gives you. It's not. It's something you build inside you, one small kindness at a time." She nodded, whispering, "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," he said, eyes distant. "But it's simple." That night, when Sandra went to sleep, she placed Keanu's letter on her bedside table. She looked at it one last time before turning off the light. For the first time in years, her dreams were calm. No flashes of cameras, no noise, just quiet waves, a soft voice, and peace. And though she didn't know it yet, that letter was only the beginning of a lesson that would change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The moment that broke her silence. The days that followed carried a strange calm, the kind that comes right before life tests you again. Sandra felt lighter, but not because the world had changed, because she had begun to see it differently. The simple things started to mean something again. The quiet mornings, the laughter on set, even the smell of old coffee in her trailer. Keanu's letter still sat by her bedside. She read it each night before sleeping, not to memorize it, but to feel its stillness. It reminded her that peace wasn't a final destination. It was a journey that had to be taken over and over again. But peace, she soon learned, always gets tested. One afternoon, during a tense shooting day, a scene went wrong. Lights failed, lines were forgotten, tempers rose. The director shouted instructions, crew members rushed around, and someone accidentally dropped an expensive prop. The noise, the frustration, the exhaustion, it all came crashing at once. Sandra tried to stay calm, but one harsh comment from a producer, something about her losing her spark, cut deeper than it should have. The words replayed in her head. She felt her old self, the perfectionist, the fighter, the one who carried every weight alone, rise back to the surface. She walked off set, her chest heavy. She didn't go to her trailer. Instead, she found herself outside, near the back of the studio where no one went. The air smelled like dust and rain. She sat on a bench, her hands shaking. For the first time in a long while, she wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. She whispered to herself, "Why does kindness always feel harder when you need it most?" Behind her, a voice answered softly, "Because kindness isn't armor, it's honesty." She turned. It was Keanu. He stood there quietly, holding a thermos in one hand. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't tell her to calm down. He just sat beside her, unscrewed the lid, and poured 2 cups of tea. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was shelter. Finally, she broke the stillness. I thought I was getting better at this, at staying peaceful. But one sentence, one criticism, and I fell apart again. Keanu sipped his tea and looked at the horizon. That's not failure, Sandra. That's being human, she frowned. But I felt weak. Like I let myself go backward. He smiled faintly. You didn't go backward. You just met another layer of yourself. She looked at him, confused. He continued softly. Peace doesn't mean you'll never break again. It means you'll know how to sit with the pieces until you heal. Sometimes strength isn't about standing tall. It's about sitting quietly when your heart needs time. His words hit her like gentle truth. She looked down, her eyes wet, and whispered, I'm tired of pretending strength all the time. He nodded. Then stop pretending. The world doesn't need you to be strong all the time. It needs you to be real, she laughed weakly. That's harder than it sounds. Yes, he said, but it's also the only way we stay alive inside. A few moments passed in silence. Then he pulled something from his jacket, a folded piece of paper. What's that? She asked. He hesitated. A letter. Not from me this time. She took it gently. From who? A fan, he said. Someone who sent it to the studio. I thought you should read it. Her name was written in careful handwriting on the front. To Sandra, from someone you don't know but who understands. She opened it. Inside there were just a few lines. You once played a woman who lost everything and still smiled. That smile kept me alive when I thought I couldn't make it. Thank you for reminding me that light can still exist in broken people. She stared at the words, her breath trembling. Keanu said softly, Sometimes people you never meet are living because you didn't give up. She pressed the letter against her chest. How do you always know what to say? He shook his head gently. I don't. I just listen. Most of the time, people already have the answers. They just need someone to remind them. The sky above them had turned orange, fading into dusk. A cool breeze brushed past. Sandra looked at Keanu, his calm presence beside her. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in her thoughts. She whispered, You ever wonder why people who carry peace always seem to have lived through storms? He looked ahead, his eyes soft. Because storms teach you what peace really means. She wanted to ask him what storms he had faced, but she saw something in his eyes, a quiet pain that didn't need words. So she didn't ask. She just said, Thank you. For what? For sitting with me when I break. He smiled. That's what peace is for. It's not something you keep to yourself. You share it when someone else forgets theirs. As they stood up to go back to set, the sky turned deep blue. Sandra felt a strange strength return, not the kind that made her hide her pain, but the kind that made her accept it. That night, she wrote in her journal again. Today I learned that peace is not about staying calm when everything is perfect. It's about finding calm when everything falls apart. She placed the fan's letter beside Keanu's old one. 2 reminders, both born from silence and kindness. The next morning, she arrived on set early again. When the same producer who had criticized her tried to apologize, she smiled and said softly, Thank you for caring enough to push me. I'm still learning. The producer was stunned. No anger, no bitterness, just grace. Keanu, standing nearby, smiled quietly to himself. He knew that lesson had taken root, but neither of them knew that. The true test, the one that would reveal just how deep that peace ran, was waiting only days away. The silence before the storm, the week began with laughter. Filming had moved to a small coastal town, far from the busy studio lights. The sea was calm, the air smelled of salt and pine, and for the first time in months, Sandra felt free. She walked barefoot on the sand each morning, the waves touching her feet like whispers of peace. Keanu joined her sometimes, quiet as always, carrying 2 paper cups of tea. They rarely spoke during those walks. They didn't need to. The sound of the ocean filled the spaces between their words. You ever wonder, she asked one morning, why peace always feels temporary? He looked at her gently. Because it's not meant to stay forever. It comes to remind us what we're capable of feeling before the world tests it again. She smiled faintly. So peace is like the tide? Exactly, he said. It leaves to teach you how to wait, and returns to remind you that you can still feel. They walked quietly, the wind brushing against their faces. For a moment, Sandra thought maybe she had finally found balance again. Maybe this was the start of something new. But fate, as always, had other plans. That afternoon, an unexpected call shattered the calm. Sandra was in her trailer fixing her hair for the next scene when her phone rang. The name on the screen froze her heart. It was her sister's assistant from Los Angeles. The voice on the other end was trembling. Sandra, your sister was in an accident. The world seemed to stop. Her hand went cold. What? Where? Is she? She's alive, the voice interrupted. But it's serious. The doctor said it's critical. She's asking for you. The rest of the sentence blurred. The sound of the waves outside turned distant. Sandra dropped everything and rushed out. The crew called after her, but she couldn't hear them. Keanu saw her running, her face pale, her hands shaking. He caught up to her near the parking area. Sandra, what happened? She could barely speak. My sister. She's in the hospital. I have to go. Now. He didn't hesitate. I'll come with you. No, it's fine, I can... You shouldn't drive alone right now, he said softly. Please. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't offering out of pity. He was offering because he understood the silence that comes after bad news. The silence that eats you alive if you face it alone. They left the set within minutes. The long road stretched ahead, the city lights fading behind them. For a while, neither spoke. Sandra stared out the window, her thoughts a storm of fear, guilt, and helplessness. Finally, she whispered, I wasn't there for her enough. I was too busy being strong for everyone else. Now what if? Her voice broke. Keanu gripped the steering wheel gently. Don't punish yourself for not being everywhere. Love isn't measured by presence. It's felt by hearts that know. She turned her head, tears rolling silently. But what if she doesn't know? What if she thinks I forgot? He glanced at her, his voice soft but firm. Then tell her when you get there. Even if she can't hear you, say it. Love has its own language. They drove through the night, the road long and quiet, the headlights carving paths through the darkness. Sandra thought about all the times she had ignored calls, postponed visits, telling herself there would be time later. But now, later felt like a cruel word. After hours, they reached the hospital. The sterile air, the echo of footsteps, the distant beeping of machines, all of it pressed against her heart. She rushed to the room, and there her sister lay, pale, fragile, yet breathing. A thin tube helped her breathe, her hand resting still beside the bed. Sandra froze at the doorway. She wanted to be strong, but her legs shook. She had faced cameras, critics, failures, but not this. Not someone she loved lying between here and somewhere beyond. Keanu placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Go to her. She stepped forward, her breath shallow. She took her sister's hand, holding it tightly. Her voice trembled. I'm here, okay? I'm right here. I'm sorry I wasn't before. The nurse came in softly. She can hear you, she whispered. Talk to her. Sandra sat there, tears falling quietly as she whispered memories. Childhood laughter, their mother's songs, late-night talks when the world felt safe. For a moment it felt like time had paused, giving her one last chance to say everything left unsaid. Hours passed. Keanu stayed outside the room, waiting silently. He didn't scroll through his phone, didn't check his watch. He just sat there, still and grounded like a quiet pillar, holding space for her pain. When Sandra finally stepped out, her eyes were swollen but calm. She's sleeping now, she said. He nodded gently. Then you should rest too. I can't, she said softly. What if she doesn't wake up? Keanu looked at her with the same deep calm that had carried her through before. Then love her as if she will. And if she doesn't, love her anyway. That's what kindness means. It doesn't depend on outcomes. She looked at him, eyes wet. How do you stay so calm through pain like this? He paused for a long time before answering. You don't stay calm. You just learn not to run away from it. That night, as she sat beside her sister's bed, Keanu sat just outside the door, watching the night turn to dawn. He didn't need to say a word. His presence alone spoke everything: quiet strength, endless patience, and understanding that kindness was not about fixing things, but about staying when others leave. When morning came, Sandra stepped out and found him asleep on a chair, his jacket draped over his arm. She smiled faintly through her tears and whispered, "You don't just talk about peace, you live it." And though he didn't wake to hear it, her words hung softly in the air, like a prayer, like gratitude, like a truth that would never fade. The day peace broke and rebuilt itself. The hospital days blurred together like pages soaked in rain. Every morning began with fear, every night ended in prayer. Machines hummed quietly beside her sister's bed, the sound of breathing alternating between hope and heartbreak. Sandra barely slept, her thoughts spinning in endless circles. Keanu stayed nearby. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't offer empty comfort. He just existed beside her, steady and gentle like the heartbeat she forgot she needed. Sometimes he brought her tea, sometimes just silence. One afternoon, after 3 days of waiting, the doctor came in with a serious face. "She's stable," he said, "but recovery will take time. The next 24 hours are important." Sandra nodded weakly. Relief and fear tangled inside her. She wanted to believe things would be okay, but part of her couldn't let go of the guilt still weighing on her chest. When Keanu entered the room later, he found her sitting by the window, eyes lost in the pale light. "She's fighting," she said softly. "The doctors think she might wake up soon." He smiled faintly. "Then she's stronger than she looks." Sandra turned to him, her eyes tired but searching. "Keanu, do you ever feel like kindness isn't enough? Like no matter how much love you give, life keeps taking?" He didn't answer right away. He sat down beside her and looked at the machines, the quiet beeping marking time they couldn't control. "Kindness doesn't stop the storms," he said slowly. "It just keeps the lights on while you pass through them." She frowned slightly. "But what if the light goes out?" He met her eyes. "Then someone else lights it for you, like you do for them when they forget how." His words sank deep. For years, she had carried others, fixed things, smiled through storms. But she had forgotten that sometimes she needed someone to carry her too. As the sun began to set, she noticed her sister's hand twitch slightly. She froze. The nurse rushed in. The doctor followed. After a few tense moments, her sister's eyes fluttered open. "She's awake," the doctor said softly. Sandra's breath caught. She leaned forward, tears filling her eyes. "Hey, you're okay." "You're here." Her sister's lips moved slowly. "You came. Of course I did," Sandra whispered. "I should have come sooner." Her sister smiled weakly. "You always came when it mattered." Those words broke her. All the guilt, the fear, the regret, it melted into tears she couldn't hold back. She leaned forward and hugged her gently, whispering over and over, "I love you. I love you. I'm so sorry." Keanu stood quietly in the doorway, watching. He didn't interrupt. His eyes softened as he saw Sandra's tears. Tears not of weakness, but release. Later that night, as her sister slept peacefully for the first time, Sandra stepped outside. The hospital courtyard was quiet, the sky full of soft, scattered stars. Keanu was sitting on a bench, his hands folded, staring at the night sky. "You didn't tell me," she said quietly, sitting beside him. "You didn't tell me you've been through something like this before?" He looked at her gently. "You didn't need to know. It wasn't about me." "But it could have helped," she said. He smiled faintly. "Sometimes we help more by listening than by sharing." She tilted her head. "Was it someone close?" He hesitated, then nodded. "My sister." "Years ago." She stayed silent. The pain in his voice was soft but real, like an echo from another life. "I used to think peace meant forgetting the pain," he continued. "But I learned it means remembering without breaking," she whispered. "Does it ever stop hurting?" "No," he said. "You just learn to live in kindness with the memory." They sat there in silence, two souls bound by grief and quiet strength. Sandra realized then that Keanu's calm didn't come from an easy life. It came from surviving a difficult one with grace. After a long pause, she said softly, "You know what's strange? I used to think strength was being unshakable. Now I think it's just being honest about what shakes you." He smiled, looking at her with quiet pride. That's real wisdom. The next day, when her sister smiled again and asked for water, the hospital felt less like a place of fear and more like a beginning. Sandra thanked every nurse, every doctor, every quiet face that had stood by her in those long nights. She had learned something deeper than success or fame could ever teach, what it meant to be human when nothing was in your control. Before leaving, she visited the hospital garden one last time. Keanu was waiting there, holding a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "You once found one of my letters," he said. "This one's for you." She opened it slowly. Inside, a single line was written in his careful handwriting. "Kindness is not what we do when things are easy. It's what we hold on to when the world shakes." Her eyes filled with tears again. "You really believe that, don't you?" "It's the only thing that ever brought me peace," he said. She smiled softly. "Then maybe that's the lesson I was meant to learn from you." He looked at her with warmth. "You didn't learn it from me, Sandra. You remembered it from yourself." They stood in silence for a while, the soft wind moving through the leaves. Her sister's laughter echoed faintly through the corridor, and for the first time in a long while, Sandra felt truly alive, not perfect, not untouchable, just deeply, beautifully human. When they left the hospital, the sunrise was waiting. Golden light spilled across the road ahead. Sandra looked out the window as they drove back toward the sea, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She realized something then. The peace she had been chasing wasn't somewhere far away. It had been waiting quietly inside her all along, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the need to be perfect. The quiet wisdom that stayed forever. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to rhythm. The movie wrapped its final scenes. The crew packed away the cameras, and the lights that once filled the studio dimmed for the last time. But something inside Sandra had changed forever. She no longer felt the need to rush, to prove, to constantly fill silence with words. Her heart had learned to breathe again. The hospital had become a quiet memory of strength. Her sister, now recovering at home, often reminded her of the promise she had made during those long nights, to live with more love, more slowness, and more honesty. Sandra kept that promise. She started waking up earlier, sitting by the window with a cup of tea instead of checking her phone. She began replying to messages she once ignored, reconnecting with old friends not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And most importantly, she began being gentle, with others and with herself. Keanu had already left for another film. His departure had been as quiet as his presence. No grand goodbye, no heavy words. He had simply said, "You'll be fine," and smiled the way only he could, a smile that said more than 1,000 sentences. Yet even in his absence, he felt close. She could still hear his calm voice in her memory, reminding her of things that now guided her every day. One afternoon, months later, Sandra received a small package. There was no name on the outside, just her address written in that familiar, careful handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside was a small notebook, the same kind Keanu used to carry on set. On the first page, a note read, "When you forget the light, write about the darkness. It helps you remember where peace lives." The rest of the notebook was blank, waiting for her to fill it. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Keanu hadn't sent her a goodbye gift. He had given her a beginning. That night, she sat at her desk and began to write. Not lines for a script, not words for a camera, but simple thoughts, truths she had learned in silence. "Sometimes," she wrote, "we meet people not to change them or be changed by them, but to remember what kindness feels like when the world forgets. Keanu taught me that peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with answers. It arrives quietly, with patience, sitting beside your pain until it softens." As she wrote, memories replayed. His calm voice, the letter he never meant to share, the night in the hospital, the long drive through silence, the paper cup of tea. Every moment was a thread in a larger story. A story not about fame or success, but about two souls reminding each other that gentleness was strength. Months later, during an interview for the film's release, a journalist asked her, "Sandra, people are saying this is your most emotional performance yet. Did something inspire it?" She smiled softly, her eyes distant but kind. "Yes," she said. "Someone once reminded me that kindness isn't weakness. It's what keeps us human when life gets loud." The interviewer nodded, not realizing the depth behind her words. But for those who knew her story, the ones who had seen her smile change, seen her listen more, speak less, they knew something beautiful had shifted. After the interview, Sandra visited a quiet beach not far from where they had filmed months ago. The sky was orange again, the wind carrying the same soft scent of salt and pine. She sat on the sand, the same place where she and Keanu used to walk barefoot. She whispered softly into the wind, "You were right, Keanu. Peace isn't found, it's made, one small kindness at a time." As the waves touched her feet, she closed her eyes. She could almost hear his voice again, calm and gentle, saying, "See? You didn't need to learn it from me. It was always in you." A tear slid down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was gratitude. Gratitude for having met someone who changed her not with speeches, but with silence, not with grand gestures, but with quiet truth. Years later, when the film finally premiered, the credits rolled with a small dedication line that few noticed but those who did. "Felt deeply for those who teach through kindness and heal through silence." And in her heart, Sandra knew exactly who that line was for, because not every lesson in life comes through struggle or noise. Sometimes it comes from a friend who says nothing but stands beside you while you find your way.